All right, everybody, welcome back to Stinker, Drinker, Thinker. We're three guys. We pour some pours, we make some cocktails, and we rank them in our own special way. A little system we've developed that's not number-based. It's just the God's honest truth. It's known as the Stinker, Drinker, Thinker. I'm Anthony Longano. I am joined by my beautiful friends and co-hosts, Troy the Body Viglotti. Troy, say hello.
Hi.
And then Matt McKibble. Matt.
Hello.
Me and Matt kind of match.
We do.
Except I'm a little bit heavier on the belly.
We're match-tastic.
Yep. And I'm allergic to shellfish, but I could probably cook better lobster than you. That's a story for a different day.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. We got a really cool one for you here tonight. And we'll start this off by saying every time we do an interview like this, it's humbling because we speak in absolutes 100% of the time here, all the time, and 80% of the time we're wrong. So all the time. And that's like... Did I say that wrong? I don't care.
You didn't.
80% of the time we're wrong. 100%
all the time. Right. Whatever it is, we've said it, at this
we're wrong about saying it. That's how
at
wrong
this
we
point,
are.
we've said it 51 times. Well, welcome to episode 51, everybody. Our second episode on our beautiful new space. So we got, obviously we already did it. You can see all the empty sample bottles here. We had Murphy Quint from Cedar Ridge out in Iowa with us tonight. Really cool interview, really cool guy. Been around the industry forever, has experiences with wine. Obviously, they make bourbon out there pretty damn good. And worked at Stranahan's out in Colorado. He's a huge single malt fan, which obviously resonated with all of us here. So we're super excited to share this interview with you. A couple things. We'll say. We didn't have a bad pour.
Nope.
We didn't have a bad time.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. They're all drinkers to some extent. There's a couple that deserve a notch above. This stuff isn't readily available everywhere yet, but Murphy promised us it would be very soon. If it's in your, again, point proven. It's right on the shelves, guys, and it's cheap and it's fucking delicious. Does anyone else have any notes before we move into the interview?
I'm just going to say, enjoy the interview. It was a heck of a time. I hope we get to make it out to Iowa because truly that would be an awesome experience. So
seems like a good guy to hang with.
Yep.
Troy. Agreed.
Yeah.
Thanks, Troy. Thanks for your 2 cents. Yeah. Guys, Murphy Quint from Cedar Ridge.
Enjoy.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Anthony, by the way. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
This is Matt. And this is Troy over here.
Anthony, Matt, Troy. Yeah,
pleasure.
Yep. Okay.
Troy, and I think you'll kind of maybe have some experience here too. Troy is our in-house sommelier. He's certified sommelier.
All right.
And then me and Matt are collectors. Obviously, you can tell Matt actually has almost about double the amount I have.
That's a problem.
Nice. Okay.
But the thing is that he doesn't drink his, and I drink mine.
Yep.
A lot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But yeah, we appreciate you having us on. I told you before we started here. Super excited to try your stuff. It's just, and we were talking about this a little bit. It's not necessarily available here, but it seems like you have quite the history just working with, at least in the alcohol industry. I think you started. Well, obviously Cedar Ridge started as a winery, but you've been doing it since you were 15 or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Somewhere between 15, 16. I got my start. My family, they started Cedar Ridge, and obviously when they started, I was in high school, and I was just working nights and weekends, just a guy working a job early on, absolutely. But as time went on, I really started to fall in love with it and really started to get more and more interested and involved, started to kind of build my own network. And then when I was in my early 20s, I moved out to Colorado and actually worked at Stranahan's for a number of years. So I have been doing this basically my entire adult life. I can't imagine doing anything other than this at this point.
Yeah, sure.
That's awesome.
Stranahan's was good. Is good stuff too. We've done a couple of their bottles on here. Were you just head distiller over there, or what did you do at Stranahan's?
No. So at Stranahan's, I was a shift brewer at first, which was so insightful. When I went to Stranahan's, my background was entirely at Cedar Ridge, and at that point in time, Cedar Ridge was more of a winery. Now we're a fairly sizable distillery, but we were more of a winery that kind of dabbled in the world of spirits. So when I got to Stranahan's, I had some education, some experience, but I gained a ton more there. I got my hands dirty. I was doing a lot of mashing, a lot of fermentation, opened my eyes to sanitation, stuff like that. Yep. So I started out as a shift brewer and eventually worked my way up to packaging manager. So I did get kind of my first management role there. And probably most importantly, I had the pleasure of working under Rob Dietrich, who I would consider to be my mentor. He is currently over at Blackened, obviously.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, still very, very tight with the guys over at Stranahan's. They're some of my favorite people in the industry. So.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, yeah. So you guys, judging by output, it seems like I'm actually surprised we haven't seen it as much, or at least not yet in Indiana, just because, it seems like you guys do produce quite a bit of liquid there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. We're putting a lot of liquid away right now, and you will absolutely see it in your area here pretty soon. This year, we're making a push right now. I'm actually going to be out there in a few weeks. We are producing a fairly sizable amount of whiskey when it comes to the craft category. We're producing a little over 200 barrels every single month. And that's 3-4 years ago, we were producing 60, 70 barrels a month. So,
sure.
We've really, really scaled it up. And when it comes to craft, we're kind of one of the fairly sizable ones at this point in time. So you'll see us not only in your area, but pretty much all over the Midwest. We have a unique strategy right now. We have become the #1 selling bourbon in the state of Iowa. We're the first craft distillery to do that in our own state. No one else has accomplished that to this point in time. And what we're trying to do now that we've got Iowa is kind of expand to the surrounding states and eventually claim the Midwest.
Sure.
There's so much going on in the Midwest, and people, they call it or treat it kind of like a flyover country. And I think that's a huge mistake on their part, a major oversight. But that also happens with competitors. A lot of whiskey distillers, brand managers, they set their sights on, the bright lights in New York City or LA or whatever. And those are great spots. I absolutely love going there. But you can also claim the Midwest, which has a lot of whiskey drinkers in it and far less competition at this point in time. So in addition to that, our brand is just a little bit more relevant here. We like to say that we're producing whiskey for the Midwestern person. It's supposed to kind of represent a Midwesterner. We have very approachable whiskey, like the Midwestern people. Our whiskey is very inviting. It's not offensive, and it's super enjoyable. Like the average Midwesterner. So that's what we're going for. We're trying to claim the Midwest here.
I dig that.
We really appreciate that.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, anyone who wants to support putting bourbon in our state, we support
all about
it.
that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. So before we get going with your line here, obviously I can see behind you, you obviously are not just drinking your own stuff, which is great. We had LC May on here, and he kind of showed us his secret cabinet at one point, but his shelf behind him was just all obviously his stuff, and he's a brand ambassador. That's his job type of thing. But and obviously you doing what you do, you have to taste other people's stuff too, and
absolutely.
I see you got one of my favorite bottles up there. You have the Westland. Is that the Garyana that you have up there?
Yeah, I have a few West. It actually goes a lot higher and lower. I'm just kind of at a close up, but that is a Westland Garyana. I'm a huge Westland fan.
So are we.
Love those guys out there.
Yep.
Yeah, they're doing really cool stuff. Matt Hoffman, their master distiller is incredible. Steve Hawley, I know he's not there anymore, but has done a significant amount of work to getting American single malt whiskey up and running. So the guys over at Westland just kick butt.
And that's kind of what I was hoping to segue into. We saw you're involved with the Single Malt Commission, and obviously the QuintEssential has done very well since you guys put it out. We're all huge Single Malt fans here.
I'm so excited.
We're so excited to try it. But yeah, and obviously there's been a lot of talk, and Matt can speak more on this than I can, but obviously there's been a lot of talk about regulating what the term single malt can mean for American whiskey, and it seems like you have some sort of involvement in that, or am I wrong?
Yeah. So we're part of the commission for sure. So there's the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission that's pushing to get this thing off the ground and get an actual definition recognized by the TTB. So that is the main goal right now. It's been the main goal for a number of years.
Yeah.
As far as Cedar Ridge's involvement, we weren't a founding member. How this all started was 8 different distilleries, or members from 8 different distilleries, met up, I believe, at ACSA, the annual convention for the American Craft Spirits Association. And those 8 distilleries, they're like, hey, man, we're pushing really hard on this single malt stuff, and America does not have a single malt category yet.
Sure.
Basically what we're producing is very similar to Scotch, but there's no recognized category for an American version of Scotch. And obviously we can't call it Scotch here.
Right.
So let's get something going. And so those 8 8 distilleries worked together to get this off the ground, and it has since expanded to, I think there's a couple hundred participating members now, and Cedar Ridge is obviously one of them. And yeah, it's something that I personally am very, very passionate about. I think bourbon will always be America's spirit. I don't want to change that. My business is a bourbon distillery.
Yeah.
With that being said, I am a single malt guy. I absolutely love single malt. I think that American single malt whiskey will eventually be the number 2 whiskey in the United States. And that's mainly because what's happening is there's been such a rush of drinkers to the bourbon category, as I'm sure you guys have seen over the last few years, that what they're going to want to do eventually is they're going to want to branch out. Obviously, they'll still love bourbon. Everyone always will. But they're going to want to experiment something that is made with a unique peat, or something that was finished in sherry casks, or something that was this or that. And single malt offers that. The rules and regulations to produce an American single malt whiskey are much less restrictive. And so therefore they can be a little bit more artistic. The person that's producing them has a little bit more artistic freedom, I guess I should say. Yeah. And so I think that the American single malt whiskey category is about to explode.
We would agree with you, and I think we've said that on here.
I hope it does.
We really hope it does. We would love to see it at number 2, and like the fact that everyone rushes to the bourbon aisle and doesn't even look over there is, I mean, it's
where all the hidden treasures are, man.
It's to our advantage.
Are you guys doing mostly? I mean, I think you guys are what? I think last time I saw you guys are doing like a 90% bourbon. Or you still? I mean, you're still heavily doing bourbon still, right?
Yeah, so that's always a difficult question, because there's 2 different ways to look at it. There's sales, and then there's production, and they're not always equivalent. Yeah, for our whiskey sales, we are about 85% bourbon, and the remaining 15% a split between single malt and rye, most likely. There's a couple other oddballs in there, but our production is not quite the same. Our production is more like 70% bourbon, and then like 15 single malt, 15 rye. So we're still putting a little bit of all those things away. With that being said, what's going to happen as we continue to grow is, there's only so many months, and there's only so many months in the year. And if we need to produce bourbon 11 months out of the year in order to meet our quotas, well, there's only 1 month left. What are we going to do with that? Are we going to do single malt or rye? We're kind of getting to the point where we have a decision to make eventually. And I'm definitely pushing hard for the single malt. While I do love our rye, I think that eventually we'll mainly produce bourbon and single malt down the road. So and not to ramble on too long here, but one more thing that's very unique about being a head distiller or a director of operations in a distillery is that the stuff that we're producing today, you got to keep in mind, we're like 4, 5, 6 years ahead of what our sales force is doing, what you guys are experiencing out there. The stuff that I'm producing right now, that my team is producing right now, is for 4 years from now minimum. So we have to really forecast what we're going to need down the road, and we are projecting significant growth in our single malt. We're projecting fairly significant growth in our bourbon as well, but not quite as much as we are in the single malt down the road.
Yeah, and also the crazy bourbon boom, and however that's going to end in the next, or maybe continue in the next couple of years too. I'm sure it's going to be a crazy forecast. So,
exactly. That's always the hard part, is that every category has their moment in the sun, right? Right now, bourbon is obviously enormous. It's been that way for a few years, and I think it will continue to be for a while. But you always run the risk of a disruptor, right? Like something could happen, and all of a sudden, wheat whiskey is the next thing, and that's all anyone cares about. Well, that's a huge problem, right? Because right now we're producing massive amounts of bourbon and single malt, and something could shift. And that's just a risky run, owning and operating a distillery. Not just Cedar Ridge, any distillery on the planet runs that risk, because we have to age our product so long that market trends can shift in the meantime. And it is always a concern. It's very high stakes, but it also makes it kind of fun.
As long as it's not peanut butter whiskey, man, I don't care. I don't care what it is.
I'm sure you guys are insulated probably, I mean, a little bit more than others, because you're using all your own grains and growing your own corn and stuff. I think, is your grandfather's farm that?
Yeah, so we do use a significant amount of our own family corn. We have reached the point now where we just simply cannot use all of our own family corn. We're producing a lot of bourbon now, and that at some point just isn't sustainable long term. So we have reached the point where we are 100% dedicated to Iowa corn. Some of our own family corn's in there, but we cannot commit to like 100% farm to bottle.
That's a good problem. I mean, that's a good problem to have,
It is. And, at one point in time, it was a really interesting feature. We were much smaller back then. We're more of a kind of I'll say like an on-premise distillery. Like people would come out, do a tour, have a drink. Now, I mean, we're really making not only a regional but eventually a national push. And at some point, we're just producing more than we can feed with our own grain. So
Sure.
We are 100% committed to Iowa corn. Now, our barley and our rye are not Iowa. Those don't really grow here. I mean, there's a few fields that use them as like cover crops and stuff. But if you take a little tour of Iowa, which I hope you guys get here if you haven't been here,
I would love to.
yeah, a lot of corn, a lot of soybeans. That's pretty much all that we grow out here. And if you teleport anywhere in the state of Iowa and do a 360, you're going to see at least one cornfield. That's just how it goes. But the barley and the rye, we get those from actually Canada. We have a malting partner called Prairie Malt up in Saskatchewan, and they're incredible. They do a really good job. I've had the pleasure of going out there and actually seeing them do some malting. It's a massive operation. It was really cool to check out. And so we're partnered up with them on our barley malt and our rye as well. That's another issue is that even if we were able to grow rye and barley, say next to our distillery, there's still the additional process of, especially with barley, needing to malt that. And that's an added complication. At Cedar Ridge, we don't have our own malting floor. Most distilleries don't. There are a few of them popping up, and it is personally a dream of mine to get there one day. But even if it was local, we'd still have an issue of needing to malt it along the way, which would be another hiccup in the process.
Sure. Well, you guys sent us a whole bunch of stuff. I think you sent us 6 samples, and you're making me thirsty talking about whiskey.
Talking about whiskey without drinking whiskey is just boring. We should definitely drink some whiskey.
What order should we do is the question.
Do you like to go in proof, Murphy, or in order of proof?
For the most part, I do, yes. I would do the single malt last. Outside of that, I would do this in order of proof. Yep.
Oh, okay. So I think the lowest proof one you sent me is just the Iowa straight bourbon.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. I'll get this open up if you want to tell us a little bit about it.
All right. Yes. So this is our Cedar Ridge Iowa bourbon whiskey. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the #1 selling bourbon in the state of Iowa, which was a pretty awesome accomplishment. And this is what I would say, our volume whiskey. It can be, as I think you'll find here, it can be appreciated neat, but it's also great in a cocktail, makes an awesome old fashioned. What we always say about this one is, this one doesn't necessarily belong on your shelf like some of the bottles behind you. It belongs in your recycling bin. This is going to be kind of a go-to whiskey, and you're going to burn through it. Whereas some of the other ones we're going to try, they're LTOs, they're limited time offerings, and you're going to want to collect them. Sure. This one's kind of old, reliable, and is always around. So the mash bill on it is 74% Iowa corn, 14% rye, and 12% malted barley. Let me pour myself a sample here.
We're all about putting bottles in the recycling here,
except for me.
Except for Matt. Matt just like
I just like to look at them.
Matt just opens them.
Yeah,
me and Troy love using the recycling can.
I get both sides. I mean, I definitely do a little collecting too, and I don't not drink anything. I kind of consider it like special occasion bottles when I get a really cool one, but I definitely understand both consuming and kind of sitting on them for a while. I've got no problem with that.
Yeah.
Just having a midlife or having a crisis of like, I have all these open bottles. Like now I have an X amount of time before, I have to worry about drinking them. It's like, oh no, what's going to happen? So,
just don't open them.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you say? I'm sorry. What did you say the barley content was in this?
It is 12% malted barley. 12%. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't know if it's just me, but it kind of pops out a good amount or a good amount.
That barley, you mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's kind of
like home.
It is noticeable, and we do shoot. we do shoot for that to be somewhat noticeable. I mean, a 12% malted barley mash bill in a bourbon. I mean, it's not like it's insanely uncommon, but not everyone goes that high. And one thing that I keep mentioning that we do is we're shooting for a very approachable, easy sipping whiskey, especially with this particular product. And that barley kind of helps kind of soften it up a little bit. So that's what we're going for on this one, is an easy sipping kind of a volume bourbon.
I would tell you this wouldn't stand a chance in my house. This would be gone. It's absolutely
it
so
smells
smooth.
it smells right down the middle in the best way.
And for being 86 proof, it's not. And we love cask strength stuff here. We like hotter stuff.
Yep.
I mean, this is it's so bold. For how long did you say it was aged?
So it's a minimum of 3 years. It's a 3-year product. But and anywhere from 3 to 4 years are the barrels that we're using in the batches. But right now it's closer to about 3 years, 2 months. Yep. So yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's still, even at 86 proof, it does hold up though. And that's something that I'm always very careful about. I taste every single barrel that I put into every single batch. And I am always concerned, what I'm shooting for is, once again, something that's easy sipping, but also I don't want it to taste like water. I mean, I don't want it to be nothing. It's gotta have certain characteristics and hold its own. Otherwise, whether you drink it neat or you put it in a cocktail, it's just going to disappear and it's not going to be a memorable experience. I like to think that even though this is what we call a volume bourbon and an economical product, it does hold up. It will satisfy a whiskey drinker who drinks it neat or in a cocktail.
It challenges me just a little bit, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't really have a ton of Iowa geography all that down, but I'm kind of curious. Is there anything? So you're located in Swisher, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I kind of stopped half introduction there.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah. So we are located in Swisher, Iowa, which is right between Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. And while we're sipping on this, I can kind of touch on that a little bit. I kind of quit my story there. I left Stranahan's, eventually came back to work at Cedar Ridge in about 2014. And when that happened, not long ago, in about 2010, they had just moved out to Swisher, Iowa from Cedar Rapids. So originally we were located downtown Cedar Rapids as this very, very small garage winery and distillery. And eventually my parents decided to kind of go all in on it and put a building out where they already had vineyards in Swisher, Iowa. And it was this huge gamble, right? Because it was a lot of money to invest, and it's a rural location. And it's like, well, are people going to show up? Are they not going to show up? And what we had to do was entice them there by offering some really good food, some live music, getting them out there to kind of enjoy the scenery and the event that's going on. And then while they're there, get them very interested in our product. So that's how we kind of built this thing, is over time, drawing people out and slowly getting them hooked on our brand. And then, you fast forward to today, we have over 100,000 visitors come through our distillery every single year. We're in about 35 different states and 5 different countries. So, we've really, really scaled up since that 2009, 2010 time when we took that gamble and moved out to Swisher, Iowa.
Sure. Were you going to ask about interaction with climate in the barrels? Is that what you were getting at?
Always. That's one of my favorite questions. Yeah, I'm just curious if there's anything specific about Swisher versus Cedar Rapids or Iowa City, or I don't know, Des Moines. Is there something that's more conducive to aging whiskey in Swisher versus other parts of the state?
I wouldn't necessarily say versus Cedar Rapids or Iowa City, as those are very, very close to us. But there are major advantages to aging in the state of Iowa as opposed to other states. And that's, and you guys probably get a little bit of this as well. What we're always harping on is the constant fluctuating temperatures that we get. Yeah. Not only on a seasonal basis, but even a daily basis. We'll see temperature swings of upwards of 40 degrees, sometimes even 50 degrees when they go from day to night. And so we're getting a lot of magic happening inside of those barrels, a lot of expansion and contraction. And so, yes, we also, we only warehouse our barrels 5 racks high. So while we do, being in the state of Iowa, we have the advantage of having land, right? So we don't have to build our rack houses super tall. We can build them wide instead. And so we do that. And I know that some distilleries, they kind of have this cool sweet spot thing going on. There's a sweet spot in their rack house and their rick house. We are actually trying to avoid that, even though I think that's a very cool concept. What we're trying to do is make sure that inside of our non-climate controlled barrel sheds, the temperature is the exact same inside as outside. We don't have any insulation or anything like that. We want to fully subject our barrels to the rapidly changing and fluctuating temperatures. So
you just leave all your doors open, right? I think if I ever recall you saying that.
Yep. Every day we open all of our doors. That's actually another really important feature that I don't get to talk about very often is ventilation actually plays a huge role in aging whiskey, right? If you're not getting good airflow throughout your barrel storage facilities, what's going to happen is the evap, the angel share, it does leave the barrel, but it can also just kind of sit on the exterior of the barrel and coat it. And you don't want that to happen. So one thing that you can do is you can get good airflow going through your barrel aging facilities to kind of take care of that problem. And that's not something that I discovered myself. I got to give a shout out to Jason over at Copperworks. He taught an awesome class on that at ACSA last year. Not the one just 2 weeks ago, but last year, how barrel aging works. And I thought that was one of the coolest courses I've ever sat through. And he really harped on ventilation and airflow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, super cool.
I didn't realize that the temperatures fluctuate. Like I would figure that you would have similar weather to us here. I mean, but obviously
we get pretty crazy days sometimes.
Not 40 or 50
enough so
degree swings.
That we weekly grow a shit ton of corn and soy.
But that's all we grow here too,
else.
Murphy.
Yeah,
it's the same thing, and it's flat as a pancake, you know.
Very very similar for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, like today, for instance, I mean, well, I guess I don't know what we hit today. I know tomorrow it's supposed to be upwards of 95, and at night it's going to drop down to 60. I mean, so
yeah, I love that.
I mean, sleeping with the windows open. It's my favorite time of the year. But then you also mentioned one thing I know that anytime I do one of these, almost no one ever gets to Iowa, which come to Iowa. It's so beautiful.
We want to travel so bad.
Troy and I have been to Iowa about 10 years ago. We were in a band that was on tour. We were there for like 12 hours and had pizza in some attic bar and left.
No, we played a show there.
We did play a show, and then they fed us pizza in their attic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird.
I don't remember much, but I do remember having a blast. But, but no, I definitely.
In Iowa attic.
Yeah, I'd want to go and learn some stuff and hang out and.
Well, first of all, make a trip out to Cedar Ridge, and we'll do a little VIP tour. We'll pop open some barrels and we'll have some fun. But while you're here, you will see a common misconception. Everyone thinks that Iowa is a very flat state, and we're actually not. It's one of the hilliest states in the United States. What is flat is the interstate, and a lot of people just drive through Iowa, and so what they end up seeing is a very flat state. But if you get off the interstate and drive around, you'll actually see beautiful rolling hills and some of the best scenery in this country. So you definitely got to get out here and check it out.
All right,
someday.
We'll go.
We have to.
Yeah, and when this takes off enough, we can all quit our day jobs. We'll come see it, man.
We do some barrel picture. We can do barrel picks or something. Yeah.
Oh, we would love to do barrel picks too. Maybe we can talk about that later.
We can definitely talk about barrel picks.
Yeah, we've been talking about that quite a bit over here. But I mean, this is great. This is very very impressive for 86 proof. I will tell you that, and especially something I think you said 3 years, 2 months, or I mean, just a good bold flavor, sweet. It's not hot at all. It's got like a little and I think it's probably the barley thing, but it's got like a little chocolate thing on it, which I love.
Yeah.
I'm literally thinking my mom's gonna be in town in a couple weeks. I'm like, she doesn't really drink bourbon or anything. I'm like, but she's interested. Yeah. I'm like, this might be honestly a good approach into it.
For sure. That you hit it right on the head. And like I said, I mean, a whiskey connoisseur won't hate this. I mean, it'll be something that they enjoy. But also someone who's new to whiskey, someone who's kind of needed an introduction to whiskey, this is perfect. It's a great starting point. That nice 86 proof and being a very inviting whiskey, it won't scare anyone away. And so that's like I said, that's the line that I'm always trying to walk is, hey, we want to appeal to connoisseurs as well as people who are new to this game. We want to appeal to neat drinkers and cocktail drinkers. How can we do that? Well, we can produce this very approachable 86 proof bourbon.
And I think I was watching an interview a little while ago. The 86 proof, I don't know, maybe the interview was a couple years old. It changed, right? It used to be like 83 or a little bit lower. Is that right? Great point. It used to be 80 proof. Yeah. And it was difficult back when we released that. 80 proof whiskeys were common. I mean, it was just normal. I mean, this was back in like 2010. And so 80 proof whiskeys were just what whiskeys were. Yeah. And then over time, I mean, this cask strength train, which I'm very much on board with, by the way, it kind of came in and really disrupted that. And so we got a lot of pullback on that 80 proof, and we needed to up it to 86. So gotcha. That's what we did. I mean, and we talked about upping it a little bit more, but what we decided to do instead was release some of these other whiskeys that we're going to try today and leave the other one to 86, because twofold. One, we didn't want that approachable flavor profile to go away. And two, if you raise the proof, you also have to raise the price. I mean, I know you guys probably know that, but a lot of consumers don't, that what you're paying for on the shelf is the proof. I mean,
right.
If
proof and age,
from,
right? I got to imagine.
Well, oh no, for sure. I mean, and there's a couple other things in there, but if you go from 80 to 86 proof like we did, you have to sacrifice some margin if you want to leave it at the same shelf price. If you go from 80 to 100 proof, all of a sudden you have a completely different price point. Yeah. So we decided to leave that one at 86 and kind of hit some of these other ones pretty hard, and to target kind of a different market at a different price point.
That's awesome. Okay. I would totally random question while Anthony's.
Good question.
Because I haven't looked into the winery at all and all the stuff you guys do.
I was on the website earlier.
Okay, I say what? Yeah, what is like Iowa wine? Like, do you guys just do a certain like grape varietal better, like different things, or I don't know anything about it. I was kind of curious.
Yeah. So the wines, the grapevines that we work with, rather, they're all basically hybrids that are capable of surviving the harsh Midwestern climate. The harsh winters. We have a much shorter growing season than, like, say, California does. So what we specialize in is grapes like Marichal Foch, Lacrosse, La Crescent, Brianna, Edelweiss. I mean, you might have heard of some of them. I actually
that's Troy's specialty. Yeah.
I actually not long ago kind of embarrassed myself in upstate New York. Someone asked me, they were like, what grape varieties do you guys specialize in? I was like, oh, you've probably never heard of them. They're Marichal Foch, Lacrosse, La Crescent, kind of Midwestern stuff. They're like, no, actually, those are the exact same grapes that we grow in upstate New York. So, kind of put my foot in my mouth there. But we have a very successful wine business as well. The thing is that there's just a difference in scale. I mean, with our whiskey, like I said earlier, we're in like 35 states and 5 different countries. With our wines, it's like 3 counties in the state of Iowa. What we're really doing is producing wine for people that come out to our facility, so they can drink it there. And then what we're trying to do is get them to drink the whiskey when they leave the property. So wine on the property and whiskey, kind of an introduction while they're there as well. And then they go to their home state or to wherever, and they keep buying Cedar Ridge whiskey. So
go ahead, Trey.
I was just going to say, so was it your parents who initially gravitated towards growing grapes, and then like the popularity started to rise with distillation in that area, or something else?
That's a great question as well. So here's exactly what happened on that front. And well, I shouldn't say exactly. I've actually asked the same question to my parents a million times, and they always give me different answers. I'm not really sure, exactly what they were thinking, but kind of how it's mainly been explained to me is that, around when my parents were turning 40, my dad was kind of having just a moment with, am I doing the right thing? I'm working all day. My retirement plan isn't really panning out the way I want to. Like, what is my fallback plan? And what is my long-term game plan? And well, he had the thought, if I have a vineyard and I'm tending that vineyard, I'll never work a day in my life. That'll be a passion project. I could do that until the day I die. So basically he wanted to start this vineyard, and that's when they bought the land out in Swisher. They planted some vines all over it. And it was a really cool vineyard for a couple of years there. The thing is my dad is also always looking for an opportunity. He's a very successful business person as well. And so, one thing led to another. Well, if we're going to have a vineyard, we might as well have a winery. And so, we opened Cedar Ridge Winery, and it's like, well, there's a few Iowa wineries out there already. How are we going to differentiate? Well, let's have a still. Why would I go to Cedar Ridge instead of any other Iowa winery? Well, they also do some brandy, some rum, some gin. So let's go try that. So basically what we were trying to be early on, like in the original business model, was a vineyard and winery that differentiated by also having a very small scale distillery. And when I say very small scale distillery, if you come out to Cedar Ridge, you will see the first still that we ever had. It's the first legal still in the state of Iowa since Prohibition.
That's
and
awesome.
It is so small. It is so small that we can't even do any like pilot stuff on it right now. We use something else if we want to get experimental. I believe the interior of that still can hold like 22.
I would say it's about 20.
To the point where I remember even when we were pretty new, there were a couple times where we had to run that through the night just because it was so small, and we had to produce some gin or some vodka or whatever it was at that point in time. But Yeah, so that's really how it happened. We planted some vines. An opportunity arose to also be a winery that differentiates by being a distillery. And then a number of things happened over time there. And one is that my dad had the light bulb moment of, hey, we're in the state of Iowa, which is covered in corn, yet no one in the state of Iowa is producing an Iowa corn bourbon. That's silly. So he kind of had that moment. And meanwhile, I was working at Stranahan's, which at that point in time was also a distillery that was very early to the game, kind of a setting distillery. And anyway, I saw people coming out to Stranahan's and camping in the alleyway, a night or two in advance to collect their special release snowflake whiskey.
The snowflake, yeah.
Anyway, I'm seeing,
I want that so bad.
and I have so many snowflake.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
I'll show you those in a second. But I've seen people camp out for those and stuff. Really opened my eyes. It's like, all right, there are people in Colorado who really, really want to support a Colorado whiskey. Meanwhile, my family's kind of dabbling around in this Iowa bourbon game. It's like, hey, I think, we might be able to pivot a little bit and hit this really hard. Iowans are also extremely proud people, just like Coloradoans. And I think that if we produce a good product that is made with Iowa corn, that they're going to come out and support. So basically, it was this perfect storm that caused us to pivot from mainly a winery to more of a distillery, and then eventually evolve to where we're at now, which is a sizable distillery that's producing at a fairly rapid pace.
And I think you guys said, if I recall, it's like an 800-gallon still. Is your latest one?
That's correct. So yeah, we have 4 stills total. To be fair, one of those stills is the one that I just talked about. That's that teeny little 20.
It counts.
So that one doesn't really count, but it is technically a still, so I will count it. Excuse me. So yes, the 2 stills that we have that we use for whiskey production. One is an 800-gallon alpha still, our stripping still, if you will, and it's traditional swan neck style. And then the finishing still that we have is a 200-gallon version of the 800 one. So they almost look identical. There's an 800-gallon and a 200 that we use for our second distillation, our finishing run, and that's where we collect our heads, hearts, and tails and all that jazz. So pretty cool pot stills. There's some pretty good pictures of them online, so check them out. But yeah, 800-gallon, 200-gallon. And then we also have a 100-gallon still that we call our everything else still. It's fractioned out into a number of different pieces with columns and stuff, so you can kind of steer this one accordingly. And we do dabble still to this day. I'm a little bit in rum and brandy and gin and vodka and stuff like that. So while we've got our whiskey production going on the 800-gallon still and the 200-gallon still, we can also produce a little vodka or whatever we want on the third still.
That's awesome.
As long as it's not peanut butter whiskey. But none of that.
The new Cedar Ridge peanut butter whiskey. Yeah. You got it.
And if you do it, it's my idea.
Fine.
You let me know.
You got it.
Anthony, peanut butter single malt. It's the
peanut butter single malt? No, please don't start that trend, Murphy. Please.
One thing I can promise you guys, and it's been brought up a number of times from fans, from employees, from people on our team of directors. It's, flavor this, flavor that. As long as I am the head distiller, I will not be making.
Can I get another?
We'll give you a little golf clap there, man. We'll give you a little golf clap.
And if someone else is doing that, that's awesome. More power to them. I don't knock it at all. I don't see the Cedar Ridge brand competing in that space. It's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make a well-respected whiskey brand that represents the Midwest and the Midwestern people. And, I'm sure you could, in a way, do that with something flavored, but that's just not what we stand for, not what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Cool. We get that. And listen, sorry for the little hiccup there. Apparently, for the listeners, Zoom almost kicked us out and made me log back in. And then I just paid $150 for some reason. I don't know.
We'll figure it out later.
We'll figure that out later. Who knows why? Who knows why? But anyway, but yeah, so moving on, the next one you sent this in order of proof. It looks like it's a port finished one.
Oh boy.
Yes, you got it. And so this is our port finished Iowa bourbon. And so basically it's the same mash bill as the one that you just had,
yep.
As will the other bourbons that we tried tonight. We really produce one mash bill of bourbon at this point, and then we just do different things with that whiskey. What is cool about this one is that it is aged in our own estate port cask.
Yep.
So that's something that almost no one else can do, because there's only a handful of winery distilleries in the country. So that's something that I was very excited about, was to produce this particular port cask bourbon. Now, once again, it still is a very friendly whiskey. However, it's a little bit more bold. It's a little bit more complex. When I produced it, though, it's tough. We didn't want this to be overdone. We didn't want it to be this like crazy port bomb. But at the same time, if you look at the label, which my lighting's pretty rough, but if you look at the label there, and you read that it's port cask bourbon, you're going to want to you're going to want to be able to pick out that port cask influence. You're not going to want to fly under the radar. So it should be somewhere in between there, where it's definitely port present, but not completely overpowering, and 94 proof. So let's get into it.
It's really fresh smelling. It smells really very fresh berries. Sometimes you get like really dense dark berries, but that smells nice. So what, I don't know, I'm going to have to educate me maybe on port a little bit, Troy. I'm sure we've talked about this a million times and I forget everything. Types of port, kind of port, is a particular...
Well, yeah, I mean, there are different types of port, but I guess the main thing is that, and you could probably attest to this, Murphy, is that it doesn't have to come from Portugal, clearly, to label it as port right now.
And it's a definite gray area. From what I understand, we're kind of grandfathered in. So that was a big thing about 10 years ago, or maybe 7 or 8 years ago, trying to make it so that it does have to come from Portugal. And I think they did make some progress on it. But what I think you can do instead is create an American port. So there's port wine, which I believe is from Portugal, and then you can do an American port wine because we were doing it before that kind of became a thing. And so I always feel kind of bad about that because I do think that if it's truly port, if it's called that, it probably should come from Portugal, just the same way that Scotch has to come from Scotland and bourbon is from from the United States of America. I think that it does make sense for port to be there, but for some reason or another, it didn't really work out like that. So this is an American port that we produce. It's a ruby port, and those casks are amazing for aging whiskey in. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Okay. So Matt, that's one part of the answer to your question.
Yeah, ruby. Okay.
Ruby is the youngest, most lively, sort of fresh, which is kind of perfect that you said that you get that freshness in the fruit.
Absolutely.
Because that's what ruby port does, as opposed to the tawny ports or older ports, vintage ports.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
What, if you don't mind me asking, do you know what grapes go into the port?
It's a couple different grapes, and to be completely honest with you, while I oversee that, I'm not the winemaker.
Yeah, absolutely.
This particular one, I can't say with 100% certainty which grapes were in that.
That's okay.
And that's so we just went through a winemaker transition. Our old winemaker was Kent Bulker, who would have produced the wine that this was aged in, and our new winemaker is Tim Hayful, and he's doing an incredible job for us. So we've always had really successful quality winemakers at Cedar Ridge, and they love to experiment. They like to make port one way this year, one way the next year, and kind of modify things accordingly. So I can't necessarily say with any certainty which type of grape is in this particular one.
Troy, if you had to take a guess, what would you think it is?
Well, I know a couple of the grapes the reds that you mentioned. I'm sure Marichal Foch is one of them. Well, I'm not sure, but I would venture to guess that would maybe be one of them, but I don't know. Either way, I could tell that there's love put into it. I'm guessing that you guys make the brandy that you use to fortify the port wine, and then
yes, we do our own high proof grape spirits. Yep.
Yeah, that's cool.
So we do some high proof grape spirits. We do some brandy, all fairly small scale, but because we fortify our own stuff with our own distillate, we have to produce that high proof grape brandy.
Yeah, the berries pop. It's so nice and sweet.
Good. Yeah,
and it's got like this, and it's the right type of spice. The finish is kind of like this nice, like spicy, tingly thing. Just on the I absolutely love it.
Two drinkers back to back.
2 drinkers back to back.
Yeah, I think.
Do you have anything? Did you send us anything that sucks? Because we'd like to call you out on it.
We try to be honest, but
you just wait. We got 4 more to try. They all suck. Joke's on you guys.
This next one, awful. So bad.
He sent it here just to test us, see if we would call him out or not. That's actually just vodka. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, but that port cask, it does have quite the following, especially in the state of Iowa. That's become one that it's not quite allocated, but it's definitely hunted. And you should honestly see it in your area. If you live in the Midwest, you will see it in your state at some point. but it'll be on a fairly small scale. You know, we're slowly introducing some of these limited time offering whiskeys into the surrounding states. So, you know, it might be like 100 cases come to Indiana and they just get spread out. And if you see it, you see it. If you don't, you don't. But,
well, if it's so, I mean, if it's like that, maybe we should just put it in the Infinidrink.
I was gonna say, yeah. What are the general like MSRP, like general prices for these guys? Like I said, I've never seen them, so I'm not really sure.
Great question. So, the first one we tried, the Iowa Bourbon, which is our flagship. That's actually you can find it anywhere from about $32 to $35, depending where you're looking. So. Definitely economical. You get up to some of these other ones we're trying. These are more a premium. The Sport Cask Bourbon, it's closer to the $50 mark. Same with the next couple that we're going to try. The Bottled and Bond Bourbon, Bottled and Bond Rye, they both are at that $50 range as well.
So, I mean, very reasonable, very approachable for pretty much everybody, especially in the bourbon market right now. I mean,
yeah, seriously, $50 is your new $20, honestly.
I was telling them earlier, like, I went to go get, like, just stop the store and get, like, a McKenna 10. It was, like, $70. Like, what is happening right now?
Yeah, we're working so hard not to do that. Don't get me wrong. We have a couple like the single barrel collection, which is our rarest item. It is a lottery item. You know, that one's closer to 60, I think 60, $70 somewhere in there. Excuse me. So that's our like most expensive one. But we're working very hard to make sure that we don't get too crazy outside of like the $50, $60 range. Just because what's going to happen at some point is with these constantly raising prices, eventually we're going to scare people out of this category.
Sure.
Eventually, people are going to see, oh, I can get a tequila or a rum or whatever for half the price. Well, I'm going to hop over to that category instead. And so, I do think that the whiskey community needs to watch that a little bit. The added complication now is that now it's kind of out of everyone's control. At first, people, I think, were getting a little bit greedy, but now you've got supply chain issues. You've got skyrocketing grain costs, especially if you use wheat. Wheat's about to disappear. So, I mean, now it's kind of out of everyone's hands. But for a second there, it did seem like people were getting a little bit greedy or kind of charging unnecessary prices, if you will.
And this is, and we talk about this a lot on here. This is just another example of the bourbon we tried first. It's literally, you said it's $30, $35. People go and they hunt these bottles. I mean, the MSRP on E.H. Taylor small batch, which is one of the most boring whiskeys I've ever tasted in my life. It's absolutely fucking horrible. And people hunt it, and then you look online, it's $199 because it comes in a tube. And this is the type of thing, like, and for our listeners out there and our viewers, if you're trying to get someone in, or if you're going to somebody's house and they don't necessarily like whiskey, and you want something there that maybe, like, even you can leave it there and make cocktails with for people there, but you want to sip it neat. I mean, this will not disappoint you for $35, man. Absolutely, it's a drinker all day long.
Hey, thank you. I really appreciate that, and you're exactly right. I mean, it's functional. I mean, it's not just, this isn't just a whiskey to kind of to tell your friends about. I mean, hey, I got one. I'm never gonna open, but I got one. Which I don't mean to knock, because to your point, if I saw an E.H. Taylor, I've never seen one on a shelf, but if I did, I would probably buy it because I've seen it on Instagram 10,000 times.
Oh yeah, same shit, man. Yeah, that's the only reason why I have it. Like we did a blind tasting on our last episode, and we put it again. I think we put it against like a Pinhook Vertical Series, and then I have an Angel's Envy 10th release cash strength, and I mean, honestly, I could put it up against the Screwball fucking peanut butter, and it would lose. It would. It's just a flat, boring whiskey. Anyway, moving on. Back to your stuff.
Put it behind us.
Hey, I am kind of curious though. Do you do much blind tasting of whiskeys?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things to do. Both with our own Cedar Ridge products and all the random whiskeys behind me. I love blind tasting. Furthermore, I mean, in addition to blind tasting, I also love blending whiskeys. Once again, even the whiskeys behind me. I was telling someone about this just the other day. What I like to do is start with 1 gram blind, not knowing what it is. And then eventually I reveal what it is to myself. And then I think, how can I modify this, or how can I make it more to my liking? And then I find another bottle and I kind of blend with it. So I get pretty wacky with it, but I do a lot of blind tasting, and then a little bit of, we'll call it plussing up, using other whiskeys to kind of blend and have a little bit of fun.
That's a cool way to grow your palate and grow your craft. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually do this thing on here. We have this decanter in the middle of the table called the Infinidrinker. And we have this ranking system. We usually rank things as obviously as stinker drinkers or thinkers. And all of anything that we classify as a drinker goes in this decanter. So obviously
we're saving a little bit.
We're saving a little bit. You're going to go in there. So we have a nice little blend of about 50 episodes worth of liquor in there.
There's everything. It's going to be miserable.
Let me ask you this. So you haven't tried it at all?
No. Actually.
We're actually going to try it tonight for the first time ever after this episode.
Yeah, after this episode.
If you're listening to this now, we would have tried it right before this episode before this, but yeah.
Yeah, we're
It's confusing how time works.
Yeah, we'll have to edit that part out. But we're going to try it very soon. But it can't suck. Everything we put in it was good.
I think you'll be surprised. I think it will be very good. I don't know. That's just my gut instinct, I guess. But a bunch of good whiskeys blended together, usually going to be good.
I would hope so. All right, well, let's move on to this. I mean, you're 2 for 2, man. You keep telling me the sucky bottles are coming, so we'll see.
Terrible from here on out.
Yeah, all right. This is the bottled and bond that we're doing. And obviously, you said most of your bourbons are all the same mash bill, so obviously this one's 100 proof. Just
correct. And did we send you both the bottled and bond bourbon and bottled and bond rye?
Yeah, I think we have.
Can't remember. I just want to make sure you got the right one.
I got the. Yeah, this is the bourbon, and then.
Perfect.
Yeah, and that's rye there too. Yeah, we got the rye as well.
Well, go ahead and so let's pour a little bottled and bond bourbon rather. I'm going to pour a little bit here as well. So yeah, as you just mentioned, it is the same 74, 14, 12 mash bill, and down the road here we are going to start experimenting with some different mash bills, but for now we're having a ton of fun using the same one and just kind of seeing how we can manipulate it a little bit. The fun thing about this bottled and bond bourbon is it's an annual release. We always release it for the 4th of July. Out at Cedar Ridge, we do a ton of 4th of July stuff. That's kind of our prime time of the year. And the process behind this one is probably my favorite thing that I get to produce. And it's because I get to produce it with my good friend, Jamie. So Jamie Siefkin is our general manager and executive vice president. So he and I have been working together for forever. I don't know, basically our whole life. And, as we've evolved and gotten a lot bigger, our company has become very segmented. There's the sales department, there's the production department, there's all these departments and they're all kind of separate from one another. And because of that, we don't all get to work together quite as closely as we did 10 years ago when it's like, yeah, I work at Cedar Ridge. I cook some pizza, I make some whiskey, I also clean the floors. So basically what I'm getting at is that Jamie and I, we used to get to do a lot together and now we don't get to do as much as a team anymore. But one thing we've made a tradition of is every single year, the two of us pick all the barrels that we use as our blend for our bottled and bond bourbon. So when we create that batch, we go through all of our barrels, a whole bunch of tasting notes. We usually need a driver home that night because it gets kind of long, but it's a ton of fun. And this is our I believe our 4th year doing it. Anyway, he and I get to do this together, and I like to think that we've gotten pretty good at this point in time. So yes, this is our annual bottled and bond bourbon release.
It is. It smells a little bit different than.
It's 14 points hotter, but it's not that much different. I still get that same kind of bold chocolate type of. I don't know where that chocolate's coming from.
Nuttiness in this one.
Yeah, I get a little bit less of the upfront barley, but I could tell it's just got a nice perfume to it. I don't know how to describe it.
I'm just expecting peanut butter whiskey now, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, honestly, you lied to me. You're disappointing me, man. I'm telling you. You told me this was gonna suck, and it does not suck at all.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Being completely honest, I don't think we would release anything that sucked. And don't get me wrong. I mean, we've come a long way. I'm sure not long ago, things were mediocre, but now I think pretty much everything we release is of high quality, and I don't think we would let anything else.
Is that just like a trial and error thing? Like, I mean, I'm sure at some point, especially when you're younger and you don't got as much stuff in barrels, it's like, well, shit. This barrel tastes a little weird, but we're gonna have to put it out if we want to, get product on the shelves.
Absolutely. And I have kind of some notes on that. I mean, one thing that Cedar Ridge has always had on its side is timing. We've had a lot of skill, a lot of effort, but also a lot of luck, timing being one of those things. When we opened up back in 2005, I mean, there were like 20 craft distilleries, and at that point in time, they weren't even called craft distilleries. We were like micro distilleries and a few other weird names. And anyway, back then, because things were so new, there was this sense of consumer patience that doesn't exist now. You know, I mean, I remember some of the first batches we put out, whether it's wine or bourbon or whatever, some of it was pretty mediocre, but I like to think that the locals, they were like, hey man, you know, this is kind of cool what they're doing. I mean, it's not perfect yet, but let's stick with them. Let's see if the seed can bloom into a flower. Let's be patient. And they were, they supported us when they didn't need to, and it was amazing. And because of that, you know, we had revenue coming in. We were able to put more whiskey down and age it longer and make a higher quality product. Well, now, if you open a distillery today, you have to be good day one, because if you're not good day one, there's 3,000 other bottles on the shelves that people are going to go buy, and they're never going to touch yours again. So we definitely had timing on our side. And you mentioned the mistakes thing. Yes, it is absolutely trial and error. I mean, I have made so many mistakes in my career. What I think that Cedar Ridge is exceptional at is we learn from our mistakes so fast and so hard. I mean, we'll you know, if we fail miserably, the next day we will be ready for perfection. I mean, like we pivot quickly, we make changes when they're necessary, and we go hard at it. So that's one thing that we're very good at, is learning from our mistakes the first time, not repeating them, and listening to that message, if you will.
The buck stops with you, essentially. I mean, you have the power to change everything, which is awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Dang.
Well,
All right. Well, no complaints yet, man.
Yeah, I mean, you know. I was so ready to yell. And
so with your bourbon, we'll get here. We'll do the rye in a second, but I've heard great things about your barrel proof offerings. I don't like.
Yes.
Is that are those like limited release things that you do, or allocated or single barrels?
A little bit. We do a ton of single barrels, and we're pretty much only doing them at cask strength now. For a long time, we offered them at 92, 105, and then cask strength. And we've gotten to the point now where single barrels are in such high demand, they're exclusively at cask strength. And if you don't want that, then you just can't have one. That's just how it is. Yeah. But so yeah, we do a ton of cask strength single barrels. We also do some distillery only releases, like we do a staff pick single barrel about once per quarter, where our entire staff is invited to taste through a bunch of barrels and pick their favorite one, and we release that in house. And then lastly, and this is the big one, is our, let's see if I have it here, our SBC, our single barrel collection. It kind of looks like that.
Yep.
Cool, fun, like basketball texture. So this is the rarest product we have. And these are released at true cask strength. I mean, this one's 121.6. We just released one at 122.3. And these ones are super allocated. Store has to win a lottery to get it, and then you have to win a lottery at the store, just because it's the way that it works is when I'm tasting through barrels throughout the year, whether it's for our standard bourbon, our Slipknot products, our double barrel, you name it. If I find a barrel of bourbon that I find exceptional, I actually set it aside, and then I will release it under that single barrel collection label. So we do some cask strength stuff. And I know that like Fred Minnick and a couple other guys were huge advocates of us doing more along that side, because our whiskey, it remains approachable even at cask strength. It's not overly powerful or, you know, any sort of like a punch in the mouth. It's still very approachable, yet complex and flavorful at cask strength.
Why do you think that is compared to, like, you know, because there's plenty of approachable whiskeys, and and honestly, you put something that's 130 proof in front. I mean, I will drink it and I love it, but there's some that are just like unbearably hot, and they're thin even at cask strength compared to like what makes yours more approachable, do you think?
A great question. I mean, and I'm sure it's any number of things, and that's one of the coolest things about whiskey is that even though the whiskey's been produced for a couple thousand years now, we still don't have all the science down. I mean, it's very tough to see what's happening inside of a barrel exactly. I mean, you know, my theory would truly be location and climate. I mean, the way that we age our barrels in that non-climate controlled location, subject to harsh winters and hot summers. We also see spring and fall. I mean, I think that's going to have a ton to do with it. And then, I mean, also, you know, the grains we use, the water, the people making it, I mean, everything above. But I think that the biggest contributing factor there is the way that we age the product.
And you guys are barreling at a higher proof, entry proof, is that right?
Exclusively 120.
Okay.
Everything we put in is at 120. Just like I mentioned, we're kind of starting to plan to mess around with our mash bills a little bit. We're also probably going to start dabbling around with barrel entry proof. But right now, in my career as head distiller, every barrel of whiskey's gone in at exactly 120.
Cool. Okay.
Yep.
Open that rye?
So let's open the rye. I got a question for you though. Well, you mentioned playing around with mash bills. I mean, when you taste this stuff, and obviously you've tasted it probably more than anyone, but when you when you taste this stuff, what do you, as far as like, okay, well, there's this note here. I want to, if we're going to change the bill, it's because of this. Like, what are you looking to do by, because honestly, it's not broken. It tastes great, but like,
great question. I'm not looking to change the mash bill for the products that we're trying now. I'm talking more on an experimental basis and doing some like limited time releases. For instance, obviously wheated bourbons are super popular now. If we produce one now and it's ready in 5 years, who knows if they still will be or not. But, but I also want to mess around with like a peated bourbon, for instance, on the malted barley portion, use peated barley instead. I want to play around with some of that. I also want to do, instead of a 74% corn, maybe a 51% corn. The thing is that we have enough of a following that we can experiment and do some of these experimental releases. Worst case scenario, we can sell them as cool single barrels and people will buy them up as long as they're of quality. So that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'm not talking about, like our core items, modifying it like, I really don't like that 14 rye,
Sure.
Let's try 7 instead. This would be more of a just kind of experimental seasonal releases, fun stuff, as opposed to changing our core items.
I got you.
Great question.
Yeah, sorry if I misunderstood you there. Going back, so we're at the rye, and did you mention before? So this is essentially Canadian rye that you're using as far as the grain. Yep. Okay.
That's correct. Yes, that's exactly correct. Yep.
It's close enough, right? What is it like?
Right
up the road.
Might as well call it Iowa. Whatever.
Yeah. Just north. It's actually really funny. When I did go up to Saskatchewan, I visited the malting floor at Prairie Malt, and then I actually met with some of the farmers. For instance, there was a gentleman named Chad who actually grows a lot of our rye. Really cool dude. But when I got up there, I kind of looked around. I was like, looks a lot like Iowa here. I mean,
colder Iowa.
Yeah, it's basically just a colder Iowa. I mean, because it is like directly north of us, Saskatchewan. It is like the Iowa or the Midwest portion of Canada. And so I was looking around. I was baffled by how similar it was to home. It's like you could convince me that I'm in Iowa right now.
So what's the mash bill on this? Is it 100% rye or?
It is not. No, it's roughly 85% rye, and then about an even mix of corn and barley in there.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's not like that overly minty type of spearmint.
It's much more
approachable.
Yeah. I should also mention one more important note on that mash bill. I mentioned that it's roughly 85% rye. 51% of that is malted in this particular batch. Down the road, we kind of slowly dialed back on the amount of malted rye, but this one does have a fairly significant portion of malted rye in it, which is a nice little touch to it.
Yeah, it's much more dense.
It is. Yeah, it's just got like a bottom end to it. Like it's not thin at all. 2 to 3 years probably, or is it longer than that?
No, 4 years. So
4 years. Okay.
These are
they're bottled in bond.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep. So the last, and I didn't mention that on the bourbon either, but both of them are minimum of 4 years old.
Well, they have to
and
I just say no, they're not. Oh no!
Don't post that. Colonel Taylor's coming for you.
And being bottled in bonds, I should also mention, as you guys might or might not know, but your listeners might not know this, bottled in bond. There are 2 different seasons to be a bottled and bond bourbon or rye. All the whiskey has to come from the same distillery and the same season. And in the world of bottled and bond, there are 2 seasons. There's January through June and July through December. Both the bourbon and the rye are from that January through June season. So we'll call it the spring season, if you will.
Yep.
Just kind of it's an important element for us in particular because, like I mentioned, the non-climate controlled aging, sometimes a product will see, say, 5 summers but 4 winters, or 4 winters but 5, or the opposite, whatever I said. But that does make a difference, if something's seen more cold weather versus hot in that non-climate controlled setting.
Do you list it on the bottle like spring 2017 or fall or anything like that, or is that just kind of just good to know?
We don't. I would really like to. I think that there's room to do that on the bottle.
That'd be cool.
The thing is when you start, it would be cool. When you start messing around with labels, it's an incredible hassle. And that's another thing that the consumer world does not know about whiskey, is that if you really want to change anything on a label, you have to go through TTP approval. You have to submit applications that cost money, and then you have to make sure you're out of all your old labels because you have to order new ones in, and it's just a major hassle, especially with the approvals process. But that would be a pretty nice touch to get.
It's
kind of almost a vintage.
Because like Chattanooga does that, where they have like
Bond, because it is an important feature for a bottle of Bond product.
Yeah, well, Chattanooga does it where they have like their label, like the fall 2017 that's circled on it, and they have both. It's interesting design choice. You can kind of like, it's like I know which bottle I have, just kind of makes it easier. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this. I will say this. That was my least favorite one, but it still didn't suck.
All right.
I'm gonna say something, right?
Yeah.
I'm shooting for not suck.
That's fine.
Suck, so.
It's not a stinker, Murphy. It's not a stinker. So I would just call it a. I mean, it's definitely just a drinker. I think one of my I love malted rye. Love it. There's a new riff malted rye that I pick up every time I see it, just because it's good. It's a good like late fall, like winter kind of drinker for me. We actually had a glass of it last night because why the fuck not? Okay. But I mean, I dig it. I don't know what I don't like about it, which is
I'm actually curious because I actually like it a lot. I don't typically like a lot of rye.
Yeah, and so Matt hates rye and I love rye, so this is kind of funny that this is happening.
Yeah.
I think it's more on the nose, man.
I can answer that for you guys. So the reason why I can weigh in on that a little bit. I am not a huge rye guy, and so as the blender of this product, I make it as a non-rye loving producer, and so
I knew I liked him.
It probably is geared more towards someone who doesn't usually dabble in the world of rye. I usually try to tone it down a little bit and pick barrels that aren't extremely spicy and aggressive as some ryes can be. I know some people love that, some people hate it, but I do typically produce our rye more to my own palate, which could be good, could be bad, I suppose. But I like a rye that's a little bit on the softer side.
Well, I mean, it's got to be a demonstration of your palate. I mean, you're the master distiller there. Like that's the whole point of it. But I think and I think you just nailed what I might not necessarily enjoy about it. Is it I can taste more of the spirit than getting that nice spice that I like with rye.
It's like a refreshing bourbon.
Yeah.
Back to that blind tasting thing. Like, I don't think that I would necessarily jump to the conclusion of this being a rye if I were tasting it blind. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I think that super zesty herbaceous quality that I get in a lot of ryes, this is just a little bit more subtle and refined, but also like Anthony was saying, has that bottom end, like a little bit more of the I don't know, like a darker quality to it from the malted rye. So I think it's just a good change of pace from some of the the MGP stuff or some of the whatever it is.
It's like if spearmint gum made whiskey and some of that stuff that comes that people source anyway.
Yeah,
like
there's not enough rye made like this.
I agree with you 100%. That's a compliment, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, thank you, and that's actually a really good point. There's so many ryes out there that are actually the same rye, and it is fun to differentiate from that a little bit, whether it's appreciated or not by the consumer community. It is fun to kind of differentiate from the same old mash bill. So that's one thing that we're shooting for.
I will say this after 4 samples. I don't know if you guys agree with me, and I can. And if we didn't already talk about this, I can tell that you're a single malt fan just by the way this stuff.
I love single malt so much.
It is very reminiscent of that.
It is very reminiscent of it, and I fucking love it. By the way, man, like I'm very, 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 very happy with it. Speaking of single malts, I think that's what's up next. Or no, you want to do that last, right? We're gonna do the double oak.
Yeah, let's hit
Double
the
barrel.
double barrel first.
Yep.
You're teasing me. I want the quintessential.
Yeah. Real quick though, I got to understand the ranking system. I know what a thinker is and a drinker. Is a thinker is that the premium offering? Or is
We have a lot of
we have arguments about this all
about
the
this.
time. A thinker is not a bad thing at all. I mean,
I think it's a good thing.
It probably is a prestigious thing, but we've called things thinker stinkers on here as well. I think that drinker is probably drinker thinker or thinker drinker is probably, we mix it up, man. We just
it's something you want to. So
I love that.
the way I describe
Not
it,
defined.
which may or may not be right, but that's how I describe it. Is a drinker is something that you can drink and you casually have. Like if you're watching TV or just whatever, you're not really paying attention to it, but you're drinking and enjoying it. Or if you're hanging out in a social setting. A thinker is typically something that is the main event of what you're doing. You are sitting down and you are like contemplating it, or it causes you to think above the norm of a normal whiskey.
Yes, that is exactly what I was hoping you were going to say. Because I am predicting a thinker coming up here.
Oh, I like it.
we got predictions. All right.
Well,
you did predict they were all going to be stinkers about 5 minutes ago. So we'll see.
Terrible. This double barrel we'll get on first, but I will mention the quintessential when we get to that one. It's what I like to do, like a lot of writing and stuff in my free time, and I'll oftentimes sip on that because it gets my train of thought going.
Yeah.
It is what I would consider to be a thinker, and maybe we'll find that on the double barrel here too. We'll see, but I'm going to pour myself a double barrel sample,
Cool.
and I will tell you a little bit about that before we get into the quintessential.
Yeah.
But all right, so this double barrel, it once again the same 74, 14, 12 mash bill. This is made of barrels that I believe were just shy of 4 years. They were like 3 years, 10 months. And then I aged them for an additional 8 months in a second new American oak treatment. So, 4 years and some change there when it's all said and done. It is new American oak char number 3 from Independent Staves in 2 different treatments. So both treatments were char number 3. And let me kind of tell you the backstory on this before we get into the tasting here. I had always wanted to do this. I had a couple coworkers that wanted us to do this. I had a good friend, Evan. We'll see if Evan listens here. Evan had been pushing for this for a long time to do a double barrel. I was nervous because as you guys have tried some of these other ones, especially our first Iowa bourbon, they're on that approachable side. They can be sometimes even delicate. And I was nervous that if we gave something 2 charred oak treatments, that it might overpower it and throw it off balance. So I was constantly checking up on this throughout the process, making sure that it was going to be good. And I'm incredibly pleased with how it turned out here. And I'll let you guys take it from there. But it was a challenge for me and something that I was very concerned about, considering our style of whiskey having those 2 oak treatments.
Sure.
I'm pretty excited. It's just one of those things where you smell it and you just get like a little curl of the side of the mouth. Just a little bit. You're like, oh, all right, I'm kind of into this.
Yeah, it's very inviting.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so inviting. And honestly, what is this? 104, 105? Is that?
It is 105.
Okay. Yep. So tasting the other stuff that we've tasted, I can see how this would play well with a double treatment. I haven't tasted it yet. But I also kind of understand where you're coming from. It's like, well, there's boldness in this, whereas maybe, 2 layers of char. I mean, is it? Well, you guys.
I'm just saying this is my favorite one yet by
far.
far.
All right, I'll taste it.
This one has out of all of our like seasonal or LTO offerings, this one sold out like that, and there are people who text me about it all the time.
So yeah, availability
and
pricing on this one. You said.
So it is it's I believe $50, $50 to $55. This is from last year's release, and that is long gone. I mean, you might be able to hunt it and find it on a couple shelves still, but I'd imagine it's gone, especially in the state of Iowa. It's definitely gone there. But however, our 2020, we're in 2022 now. Our 2022 release is going to come out here in the next couple months. I believe it's scheduled to come out in October. And so the next year's batch will be out there. It will come to your territory. It'll come all throughout the Midwest. Every state will get an allocation of it. So
maybe we'll just come. Maybe we'll just come to you, man.
So if we were going to come to Iowa, what's
October
the best
would
month?
be a good time. This is
sure.
delicious, and like the second barrel, you can kind of taste, and it's. You did a great fucking job, man. The second
Hey, thank you.
that the worried about overcharring it or tainting the barrel, it's the perfect amount of that like ash on your tongue.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
and we've
bitter,
tasted,
but in a great way.
What was the one that we had? Oh, it was the Architect series from Penelope that had it was like a level 5 or a level 5 char, and it literally tastes like I licked a log that had just like simmered out.
Yeah.
And it was too. This is like it's got the right amount of that, and then obviously the sweetness of your stuff is still. And I mean that and some some people get offended by using the word sweet when it comes to bourbon. I mean that with all due respect. It's beautifully sweet, mixed with like this campfire thing on the finish. Great job, man. Like yeah. So your friend's name was Evan. Evan, you should
Evan.
you should listen to Evan more.
Oh, man.
Except if Evan says peanut butter or cotton candy whiskey, then you smack Evan. But
Oh, don't say that. Evan does not need you building confidence.
Yeah, this I mean, the other ones are good. This is definitely more in the great territory. I'm gonna say.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking about it. So yeah.
Maybe a thinker. I don't know. Maybe a
Yeah, I
thinker.
mean, maybe it might be.
It's definitely the
Knocking
one that,
on the door.
It's definitely the one that made me think the most about it. I mean, just because there's like a couple levels of depth there that maybe or at least are not in the other ones, but
Yeah, agreed. It definitely has more depth, but what I think it really maintains is balance. I think it's a very balanced whiskey. And that was my biggest fear in producing this. As a matter of fact, I almost went with obviously char number 3 for the initial phase, but for the secondary treatment at the last second, I almost thought about stepping down to like a 2 for the second treatment, and I'm really, really glad I stuck with the 3.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Like, so again, I mean, I know we talked about trial and error, but do you like maybe put a couple barrels or a single, one barrel that's level 2 and one barrel that's level 3, and then you test the product and you're like, all right, well, next time we make this, it has to be level 3 every time type of thing, or?
Yeah, you can do that. That's not what I did in this particular thing.
He went for
You're
it,
just
didn't
like,
you?
fuck it.
Yeah.
It's all level
We're
3.
doing it live.
And if it happens, it happens. If it
I'm
doesn't,
going all in.
yeah.
So here's the thing about that is that I've been doing this long enough now that I've developed enough confidence that even if I produce something that I think is a little off, I do have enough confidence in myself that I'll be able to fix it. For instance, I mean, if this was over oaked, I think over time, I could blend it into if it was over oaked, I could put it in a batch of our standard Iowa bourbon, and I think that might actually help that out a little bit.
Sure.
It would kind of wake it up. So even if it didn't pan out the way I wanted it to, I knew that I would be able to utilize it for something that would contribute to our company in a positive manner. So because of that, I just went for it. I went with the 2 char number 3s on this. Yes, I think if you're going to go with a much larger scale, production, you might want to do a little trial and error first, and you might want to test out a few different chars. But once again, I knew that even if it didn't pan out, I could still use that whiskey, and it's not like we'd have to dump it down the drain.
Sure. What was I going to ask you? I was going to ask you something about that.
About charring?
Well, no, you got me thinking too much. It's a thinker drinker. Yeah,
This is what happens when Anthony thinks he
you got
forgets.
me thinking too much. Well, okay, yeah. So the secondary treatment, you might have said this before, but how long is that?
I believe so. I don't have my notes in front of me. I believe the secondary treatment was about 8 months. So,
okay.
It was 8 or 10 months. The problem is I'm getting my numbers confused. I think it was about 3 years, 10 months, and then an additional 8.
Okay.
Or it was 3 years, 8 months, and an additional 10. I can't remember. Yeah, but it was somewhere in that range. The secondary treatment was not quite a year, and I think it was about the perfect amount of time. Had I left it in there longer, who knows? Maybe it could have been thrown off balance.
Sure.
And we're, like I said, the next lot of it is actually going to come out here pretty soon, and we'll see if I can replicate, improve, or go backwards a little bit.
I'm assuming you've tried that already, though.
Did you do anything differently for this one?
No, we produce more of it. I actually this one out of all the whiskeys that we've released, this is one that I'm most proud of. One of them. It is one of the ones that I'm most proud of. And so I didn't want to really change it too much as I wanted to more along the lines of replicate it, because last year this was mainly available in Iowa and Minnesota, and this year it's pretty much all the Midwest. And I want all the Midwest to be able to experience it. This batch is pretty much gone, and I want people to see it. So what I'm trying to do this year is replicate it. The year after that, maybe I'll throw a little curveball in there. We'll see, but this year is more of the exact same.
Awesome. I'm gonna find me a bottle.
Yeah.
Well, do you want us to do the Slipknot stuff before we do the quintessential? I'm just trying to tease Matt even more.
You're gonna kill me.
We probably should though. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I liked you. I thought we were cool, man.
So did I hear you right before saying that this wasn't just like a limited release of small batch and like the number 9. I think it was you guys are gonna regularly do this. It sounds like.
So here let me run you through Slipknot, and that might answer it. But with the band Slipknot, we have obviously a collaboration partnership with them, and we make 2 core items with them: our Slipknot number 9 small batch and our Slipknot number 9 reserve. Those are the 2 core items. However, I don't know what you have there for sure. We did just come out with a seasonal release, a limited time offer release with them called Red Cask. It's Slipknot number 9 Red Cask. And basically it's the same style of whiskey finished in ex-red wine and ex-port casks.
Ooh,
Clown, the head of the band, who is the guy that we work with the most, his name's Sean, but his stage name is Clown. Incredible guy, by the way. He is really hands-on with this stuff and very innovative. And he wanted to do this finishing cask treatment in red cask. So that's what we went with there. He has a ton of say in that stuff. So I'm not sure entirely what you have in front of you. The best way to find out is to taste it, and then we can talk about it, and we'll know for sure.
Okay. I think it's definitely the small batch.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure small batch. All I know is it had black and gold, and it was corn.
Corn.
Yeah.
Some corn on it.
Yes, that's all I need to know. That is the small batch, and so that is the like the flagship, if you will, release of the Slipknot number 9 Cedar Ridge partnership. And so what that is it's a blend of bourbon and rye, and it's released at 90 proof. The reserve is 99. So what Clown and I did together when he first came out to Cedar Ridge, we tasted through a bunch of different barrels, tried a bunch of different blends, did a bunch of different proofs, and ultimately what we landed on was roughly a 60% bourbon, 40% rye blend at 90 proof. And so what I always say is, Clown kind of created that recipe, that 60-40 blend. What I'm doing is I'm following it, but I'm kind of cooking to taste. So, if I've got 60-40, but it's tasting a little off balance yet, maybe I'll modify it to more of a 65 bourbon, 35 rye, or vice versa. So I'm really cooking to taste on this one, batch by batch. I want to make sure that it's of quality. But what you should have there is something that's fairly complex, fairly well balanced. You're going to taste that rye, but you're also going to get a lot of sweetness from the corn. And, the last thing I'll say about it is that once again, this created a serious challenge for us at Cedar Ridge, because we're always producing that approachable, easy sipping style whiskey. Well, Slipknot, I don't know how familiar you guys are.
Very approachable, easy listening band.
On stage, they're about the opposite of approachable and easy listening. By the way, if you haven't been to a Slipknot concert, get to one. They're insane. They're so cool. They just go bananas on stage for like an hour and a half. Anyway, we couldn't come out with this like super overly approachable product to represent them. So what Cloud and I did together is we decided we'd do the blend of the bourbon and rye to kind of wake up the weaker spots, I guess, to kind of bolden it up a little bit, if you will, and to make the whiskey represent what the band is, to make the whiskey sound or taste like the music sounds, if you will.
And I probably missed this because I was so busy thinking about what was in the glass. But you said it's the same bourbon mash bill and the same rye as ones we tried earlier?
That's correct.
Okay, cool.
It is those two whiskeys blended together. Cool. So if you actually take the bourbon, the bottled and bond bourbon we had, and the bottled and bond rye, and do roughly 60-40 blend, what you're going to come up with is something fairly close to what's in your glass right now.
Cool. So if you're at home, you have 2 bottles. You can't find the corn bottle. You just make your own.
Yeah.
It's a DIY. Yeah, it's a DIY corn whiskey. There you go.
Although I'm sure I'll be hearing from Slipknot on that one.
Oops.
Did you call it corn? Like the band corn, or you're talking about the corn on the
'cause it's got
label?
corn on the label.
I was like, dude, don't are you serious?
No,
Yeah.
that's not what I meant. I meant that I basically just told the consumer that they don't need to buy.
I'll delete it if you want me to.
No,
I'll cut it out.
We can edit that out, Murphy. That's no problem.
It's a funny, important. It's an important. No, I say it all the time. I was just kind of joking around with you guys. But yeah, it is 60% Cedar Ridge Bourbon and 40% Cedar Ridge Rye, and yeah, that's at least how it started out. And yeah, it's a quality product. And what's really cool about it is the true involvement of the band Slipknot. Particularly Clown.
That's really cool. I've heard Clown is I mean, I haven't done too much research on it, but like I've heard he's obviously, and just by what you're saying too, he's obviously very involved there. Like, you know, I've heard some things about his collection as well. That he is a collector. Obviously, he's an enthusiast. But is it just him that's involved with it, or is any of the other band? Or
no, there are some other members involved. However, this is definitely his project. He spearheaded it. Sure. When he came out to create the prototype, the initial blend, whatever you want to call it. It was just him and me. So, I mean, he is definitely the one in charge of this particular project. However, a couple of the other ones have definitely come out and checked the place out. We've done some bottle signings together and had a good time. So, yeah, the band's involved, but it's definitely spearheaded by Clown.
Sure. That's cool. And that's really cool that they did it. Obviously, they're from Iowa, too. I mean, just a little homegrown thing there for them. That's really kind of cool. And I'm sure it helps put you guys on the map even more than you already are too, especially when you're trying to expand even more nationally.
It definitely it did a lot for us on a national level, just like you suggested. I mean, we've come a long way over the last few years. I think a lot more people know us now than they did, but 3-4 years ago when we started this with Slipknot, we were very well known in Iowa and maybe a little in the surrounding states, but you get to Texas, Louisiana, wherever they just didn't know us, and we got a lot of national news over partnering up with Slipknot. That's for sure. And we've followed them around the country on their tours, and we've done bottle signings with them, and it's definitely gotten our brand out there a little bit more too. So we like to think that both parties have definitely benefited from the partnership. At least that's the goal.
That's awesome.
Yeah, love it. That is pretty awesome.
Well, the whiskey's
all right, Murphy, don't hate me. Not a fan of it.
I don't hate you.
Yeah, I'm not. This one's probably my least favorite.
Really?
And I would love to try the reserve. I've literally heard nothing but good things about the reserve. I mean, this is probably my least favorite. I would probably have to, if you weren't here right now, I would call it a stinker. But you're here,
really?
So I can't.
You gotta be honest. That's the whole point.
I'm being honest, man.
Speak your mind. That's totally fine.
Well, I mean, if anything, that's just complimenting the rest of your stuff because, I mean, comparatively, and it's interesting because I really like the bourbon. I thought the bourbon wasn't thin at all. I thought the rye had a nice bottom on it, especially for a rye. And I feel like this is thin. And I don't know if that's me, but I feel maybe it's probably me. But I feel like it's just a little bit thin. I mean, I'm getting both of those elements in the blend, but
I don't think it's quite a stinker. I'm still going drinker by far.
Okay, okay. Yeah. I would say this too. Out of most and I hate to classify this as a celebrity whiskey because that's usually celebrity whiskeys go to blenders or source and they put it in a bottle. Like that's not at all what this is. Obviously, they went to what was a craft distillery. Obviously, you guys have grown up quite a bit from what you're saying, and obviously we've heard of you before. We did this, we just can't get our hands on it type of thing, like we said. But I wouldn't necessarily call this a celebrity whiskey, but if it was, I think it would be a notch above some of the shitty.
I'm pretty sure it's the best one I've ever had.
Yeah, exactly. So, that was my point exactly. So
there's a lot of that out there, but I guess what I'd say on that is definitely try that reserve. What's funny about it is that they're the same blend. I mean, they're both 60-40 blends, but that reserve, only our most premium barrels go in there. I'm very, very restrictive on what barrels make it into the Slipknot reserve.
That's cool.
I would be willing to bet out of the ones that we've tried today, it'd be up there with a double barrel. With you.
Okay.
I bet that it. So we'll have to follow up with some samples on that and see what you think.
For sure.
But, I would love that. I would love that. I will tell you this. This is how I treat a stinker. It's empty. So,
Anthony drinks it no matter what, so that's not. Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, well, no. I mean, we poured a bottle.
Oh, geez.
Ironically enough,
that,
we poured a bottle of Woodford Double Oak down the drain the other day. So,
well, that was
Ooh.
that was one of my first bottles I ever bought. I think it was like 2.5 years old. And it had a little bit left in the bottle, so it was just super. I'm pretty sure it was oxidized.
I was mad at it because it was sucked, so
bad.
we threw it down the drain. But so, just before we get into the quintessential, because I really just want to make Matt wait even longer. Were you a fan of Slipknot growing up? Like, was that a pretty?
Yeah. So, not to the extent that I am now. Obviously,
Sure.
I've gotten to know them very well, and I'm a huge fan now. But yeah, man. I mean, I remember like 5th, 6th grade. They came out with one of their new albums back then, and it was all anyone talked about. I mean, it was a huge deal. Especially with them being an Iowa band.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like all I heard for a couple of years there. So yeah, I've always been a fan there. I definitely had friends who were bigger fans than I was.
That record was probably called Iowa too. If
I believe you're right.
yeah, how old are you? If you don't mind me asking.
I'm 34.
Yeah, so that would be. Yeah. How old are we? Yeah, I'm 34. I have to
How
guess
old
too.
are we?
Yeah, I don't even remember anymore. We're 33. I'm 33. Matt might be a couple years.
32, baby.
Matt's the youngest, I guess.
There you
Yeah,
go.
that had to
whole
be
life ahead of
Iowa
me.
because that's exactly when they came out. We've always kind of me and Troy have always kind of listened to them. Me and Troy are musicians. Matt's kind of a musician. He sucks, but
I literally went to school for music. All right, whatever.
so we grew up listening to that. Their drummer, back in he was fantastic.
course.
So, anyway, we'll move on here. So this
No,
is
just
the
keep talking.
quintessential.
No, just keep talking. I don't need to try it. It's fine.
No. I'm more excited than you to try this. Trust me.
Yeah.
I've heard absolutely amazing things about this quintessential. So I'll start pouring it if you want to start giving us.
Yeah, I will dive into that. And I mentioned that the double barrel was one of the things that I'm most proud of. The reason I was very quick to suggest one of the things is because the quintessential that we're going to try now is absolutely the thing that I'm most proud of throughout my entire career. It's kind of my baby and my favorite thing that I get to spend time on. So what this is an American single malt whiskey. Label looks like this, if you will. Rough lighting, but American single malt whiskey. And what I'm going for here is something that is very complex. The label says rich and complex, but the complexity is key. How we're producing it is for the first 3 years of its aging, roughly the first 3 years, it is in ex-bourbon barrels. So it starts out in ex-bourbon barrels similar to a Scotch style. And then from there, after those 3 years are up, we transfer all that whiskey into unique finishing casks. So we go with a number of different barrels for that. Brandy casks, rum casks, sherry, port, Madeira, basically you name it. If there's a cool cask, I'm going to transfer.
That's amazing.
Holy shit. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's really, really fun because I also get to procure the barrels. We use a lot of our own barrels, obviously our own red wine, our own port, stuff like that. But I have a ton of fun working with barrel brokers to source cool sherry casks, authentic sherry butts, to pick out unique brandies, whatever. But so anyway, it sits in the finishing cask for another 2 years, and then the real fun part of the process starts. So in our distillery, we have what's called a Solera vat. It's an 1,100 gallon wooden vat, basically a big tank. And it is, at this point in time, it'll be half full of single malt whiskey. What I need to do is take all these different finishing casks, lay them out across the floor, taste through them, and determine which ones would best complement what's already in that vat.
Holy crap.
I need to fill it the rest of the way up to make the best overall batch possible. Then we bottle it down, fill it back up, bottle it halfway down, fill it back up. So it never goes empty. It's always at least half full. So what we're going for is just a complex single malt that has those notes, fruit forward notes of, say, wine or brandy. Has some like molasses notes in it from rum influence, has some raisin and fig from sherry. You'll get plenty of sherry. And then lastly, I also have to mention that every now and then I will add a barrel of peated malt into it too. So it's important to know that this is not a peated single malt whiskey. It's not a smoke show. I always say that it's like a supporting role. It's not the headliner. It's there if you look for it, but you're not normally going to pick it out. So it just rounds it out nicely. So anyway, I'll kind of stop rambling about it, but that's what this is.
What an awesome process.
Yeah.
That sounds like a fun. That just sounds like a vacation.
And it's you having fun at your job and then winning awards for it at the same time. That's pretty cool.
That's exactly it. It's basically like a creative outlet for me. It's essentially a giant art project, and I just get to geek out over it all the time. I mean, what's also fun is that, you know, when we lay out all those different finishing casks across our distillery floor and taste through them and add them into our vat, I do personally pick which ones go in the vat, but I make sure the entire team, whether it's distillers, packaging people, our front of house restaurant staff, I make sure that they get the opportunity to come taste these different single malts individually, because it's so much fun. And where else do you get to do that? So basically what I get to do is just have a ton of fun on this particular project. Yeah. But also it's a huge challenge because we never emptied that vat. It's incredibly high stakes. You know, if I throw the wrong barrels in there and make this thing off balance, the only way to fix it is to over time, like, dilute it with new barrels. And that's not a good way to handle that at all. So I have this like phase a month out. I'm really enjoying my time adding barrels to this vat. 2 weeks out, I'm starting to get a little stressful. 1 week out, I'm like, I can't get this batch right. Like, it's driving me insane. I can't get it done. And then usually, you know, just a couple days before I need to wrap it up, I'll hit it and I'll feel super, super proud and excited and relieved. So anyway, it's a ton of fun. There's nothing I love doing more. And it's definitely the highlight of my career.
I have never smelled fresh out of the oven oatmeal chocolate chip cookies like this in a whiskey in my entire life.
Nice.
And all I can smell is that note. And I just literally want to sit here and just, for the rest of the time, just smell this.
What's it proofed at?
Oh my God.
92.
92. I was going to say, it's very smooth.
Oh, so smooth.
Yeah, very smooth.
Thank you. And we are experimenting with some other versions of the QuintEssential. For instance, later this year, I'm going to release our first Distiller's edition of it. It's not going to be called Distiller's edition because I think that's trademarked by Diageo. But basically, something similar, like a 200 case batch of something that, you know, is maybe more sherry and peat forward or this and that.
I just need to move
Murphy,
to Iowa.
what month are you doing that?
Yeah, I need to move wherever you are. Whenever you're doing
that'll be more November, December time of the year.
So pretty much what you're telling us is we have to stay with you from October till Christmas.
That's exactly right.
All right.
Quit our jobs. Yeah. We'll sneak in. We'll try some of the single malt stuff.
Yeah.
Man, this is great, man. This is good. I told you this at the top. We love single malt here. Obviously, we're bourbon fans. I seasonally fluctuate between rye and bourbon, but I can drink single malt 7 days a week.
I think I'm all in on single malt.
Yeah,
at this
me
point.
too.
Yeah, we all are.
Hey, man. Yes, we are, and that's something very near and dear to my heart. And I see that you have some good ones there. I mean, obviously, I see you have Stranahan's. I'm big on them as I used to work there. You know, there's so many good ones. There's Westland, Westward, Bacones. Whiskey Del Bach, Virginia Distilling. I mean, I shouldn't have started naming them because you'll leave a bunch of them out.
Westward.
I mean, we've done most of them on here. I mean, I have 6 bottles of Westland there. We got some Stranahan's. We love Balcones. Balcones
wins everything.
It wins every blind shootout. We did a March Madness bracket on here. The single malt won that. I mean, we had some bottles on there, man. I mean, we had some stuff on there. We did Virginia Distilling. We did a whole night with them. That's the Courage and Conviction is absolutely fantastic stuff.
Oh, the Courage and Conviction is incredible. Yeah. They do a really good job on that. Yeah.
So what is so I mean obviously you worked at Stranahan's for a while. I'm assuming you picked up a thing or two about single malt there, I'd imagine. But like, what is when's the first time you tried single malt? What do you drink if you're going to grab a single malt that's not the QuintEssential because you're tasting it all day type of thing? You know?
Good question. So Stranahan's is exactly what got me very interested in the American single malt whiskey category. However, I should also say being at Stranahan's is really what got me interested in whiskey. I mean, that like I said, going into my time there, I didn't have a ton of whiskey experience. It was more just like cellar work, cleaning, making wine, doing stuff like that. But then I got into Stranahan's and it was this whole different world. And while I was there, I ran into a bunch of my people. I just didn't know that I was one of them yet. And they love to bring bottles to work and share with each other and like, hey, you got to try this one. And one day, my shift mate and I, Jason is his name, one of my favorite people I've ever worked with. Jason came up to me we were working the night shift together. He's like, Murph, you got to try this. You know, we were both fairly new to whiskey at the time. He's like, this is Balvenie Caribbean Cask, 14.
Oh yeah,
Balvenie 14 Caribbean Cask.
oh yeah.
And I tried it. I was like, oh wow, I've never had anything like this. This is bizarre. And that was really like what opened the door for me to explore single malt in general. And then I had a couple years long exploration of single malt Scotch. I absolutely fell in love with it. Worked my way into peats, Lagavulin. To answer your question about like what am I gonna try if it's not Cedar Ridge QuintEssential? I love anything that's heavily peated. I love sherry influence. So if you're going to talk Scotch in particular, Lagavulin Distillers Edition, Talisker Distillers Edition, I love. If you're talking American single malt, the ones that I named, we recently did some trades with Balcones, obviously Stranahan's. There's so many, but that's the coolest thing about American single malt whiskey, or single malt whiskey in general, is that it, out of all the things that could be like the wine trail, you go down to California and you go to all these different vineyards and wineries and taste their different products. Single malt in America is kind of like that. It's like, it's not so much tied to the grain or the land, but just each single malt distillery has their own style and their own tradition. Westland single malt, if you put Westland, Westward, Cedar Ridge, Balcones, and Virginia Distillery all next to each other and did a flight of those single malts, they're all 100% malted barley, but they will all taste so very different.
Oh, 100%.
And that's what I love about that category. Whereas in bourbon, which, like I said, I'm a bourbon distiller, I love it. If you took 5 bourbons and set them right next to each other, they would be different, but only so much range. They can only be so different from one another.
Yeah.
In single malt, you've got finishing casks, you've got different malts. There's just this whole world that you have, and that's why I love it.
And I love that, like, the community, especially like, you're naming some at least some of my favorite like heavy hitter American single malt distilleries. I love that, like, you guys all seem to be not in cahoots, but just like friendly and friends. There's no competitive like nature to it at all. It's like, you all respect each other. I dig that about the community.
For sure. There's the incredible respect. We all love what we're doing. That's what this is all about. But at the same time, there's also like the business side of it. We're all trying to, before we all start claiming our piece of the pie, we're trying to work together to make the pie bigger. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
If we stop now and I'm like, oh, I'm going to steal Whiskey Del Bach's pie, that's silly because there's not enough to fight over yet. So what we need to do is all the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission, we need to continue to get to get this on everyone's radar and increase the amount of consumers before any of us start getting competitive. And even then, I think we'll all still be pretty much on the same team, just because I am incredibly fascinated by what they're doing at Whiskey Del Bach or Westland or Westward. They're all doing different things and we all share trade secrets. We all like to get together and pour each other's samples. It's just a ton of fun.
That's cool, man.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's great.
This QuintEssential has to be the most split thinker drinker that I could
straight 50-50.
Like 50-50. Seriously,
Troy, could you put a pour spout on it?
I probably could.
Yeah,
but I could also, I could also ostracise myself from all of my friends for a whole weekend, and with a notepad and just like take notes on the evolution of it.
The process and the painstaking. The shit that you go through to make this, which is fun for you, but like, obviously
so fun.
it's obviously a full-time job. It absolutely translates, man. It is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, every sip is different. Every sip tastes great. I would say this is the definition of a thinker drinker.
Yeah, truly,
and which is like probably the highest compliment you can get on this show. So
I really appreciate that, guys. Like I said, this is out of all the things that I've done in my career, this is the number one thing I'm most proud of. So your kind words genuinely mean a lot to me on that.
Sure,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, man,
that was worth the wait. That's all.
Are you happy now,
God,
Matt?
that was good. Yeah.
Well, listen, man. This has been a pleasure. Absolutely enjoy all your stuff. I really appreciate you being on here. All the samples you sent to. Seriously. And when I called the rye a stinker, it's because I was comparing it to 5 other ridiculously good pours, man.
Yep.
So, thank you so much for that too. And you're obviously extremely knowledgeable and personable too. So we genuinely enjoyed your company here. There's one thing we ask all of our guests to do at the end of you being on here.
I don't know if you've seen this or not yet, but we do a hearty little yodel.
It's a yodel.
A yodel, okay.
It's from the chest and from the heart, but like a yodel.
Or yodel-hee-hoo, or something
yeah.
like that.
And essentially it's you leading us out. Are you going to wake up your kids if you do this?
We'll do it in unison.
We can all do it together if you want.
I mean, it'll be a peaceful yodel. It won't wake anyone up. Yeah, you ready for me to yodel?
We do a 3-2. We'll do
Yeah.
a 3-2-1. We'll all do it together if you want.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Keep
Keep
it simple.
All right, ready?
All right, ready?
Yeah.
3, 2,
2,
1. Yodel. Love
Awesome,
it.
man.
Hell
Hey,
yeah.
thanks again.
I'm not gonna lie. I was a little nervous that you guys were gonna go 3-2-1 and then just.
Well,
Anthony,
that's funny. I
Anthony
didn't.
tried
I
it.
thought
I
that these
saw him
guys were.
stop.
Yeah, I definitely did not yodel on that one. I was trying to. I thought
right?
that these guys were reading my mind. But anyway,
I wouldn't do that to you.
I thought it'd be a good time.
No.
But hey, man. Hey, thanks again.
Truly, thank you.
To all our listeners out there. If you're in an area where this stuff is on the shelves, do yourself a favor. It is. I mean, and it's. And I'm not telling you to jack your prices up. This stuff is cheap compared to what it's worth, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So yeah, absolutely. If you guys see this out there, grab it on the shelves. You guys can follow them on Cedar Ridge on Instagram.com. Murph, do you have any other outlets you want them to be aware of, or?
Yeah. Check us out. Cedar Ridge, Iowa is a handle that we use on a number of different social media platforms. I also manage my own little Instagram page, just kind of some behind the scenes Cedar Ridge production stuff.
Nice.
That's kind of fun. Just at Murphy Quint on Instagram. So check that out if you will. And yeah, guys, thanks so much for having me on. This has been a ton of fun. And
Thank you.
Maybe we can do something in the future and revisit some of this. I'd love to get back together with you guys.
I would
again
love
soon.
that so
Awesome,
much.
man. We greatly would appreciate that, man. Hey, Murphy, thanks again for joining us, man. I hope you have a
Thank
good
you.
night, all right?
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, man.
Have a good night.
See ya.
Yeah.